The highest-ranked American in the draw sat down in front of the Toronto press this month, got asked point-blank what Alexandra Eala is bringing to tennis, and gave an answer so generous that almost nobody noticed what was missing from it. Coco Gauff called her a great role model. She said the audience Eala is pulling into the sport is something the entire tour benefits from. And that compliment is not the story, because the story is what Gauff said 40 seconds later, when a second reporter pushed her on the one match these two have played that actually matters, and the world number 4 admitted on camera that she cannot explain what happened to her. So here is your question for the comments, and give me a real answer, not a polite one. If you were seated in the top 8 at Flushing Meadows on August 30th, would you want Alexandra Eala's name anywhere in your quarter? Hold on to that, because before we get to the sentence that should genuinely worry the rest of that draw, you need to see how carefully Gauff picked her way around it. Start with the setting, because the setting is what gives this weight. Gauff had just come through her round of 16 in Toronto against Alina Korneeva, a 19-year-old qualifier, 6'3", 6'1". She is a two-time major champion. She was 2 wins from a title, and a reporter asked her about a player sitting in the same section of the same draw, 1 win away from meeting her in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I think, like I said before, the demographic that she brings to the sport of tennis is something we all benefit from. And
that is not a throwaway line about a promising kid. That is the 4th best player on earth telling a room full of reporters that a direct rival is good for her business, while that rival is warming up to play in the same building. And notice the construction. Like I said before, she had said it before. In Dubai, in February, after their first meeting, Gauff had already gone on record about the Filipino support in the stands, saying that watching a nation who maybe do not always feel represented in the sport see themselves out there was inspiring, and that it made it fun for her to go and play. So this is not a one-off courtesy. This is a pattern of a player being repeatedly asked about somebody else and repeatedly choosing to build them up. Think about that for a second, because that is not how tennis players normally talk about the person who might knock them out on Tuesday. But here's the part that makes it so much more interesting than a nice moment. In that same room, minutes earlier, Gauff had been asked about the depth of the women's tour, and she gave an answer that reads completely differently once you know what was coming.
There's no one that I think you get first round and you're like, phew,
Read that again. There is nobody left on the WTA that you draw and exhale. Gauff said the depth is stronger now than at any point since she came up, that anybody can win on any day, and that it shows in the stats and in the fact that the majors keep producing different champions. She was describing the tour in general. She had just spent several minutes describing one player in particular. She did not connect those 2 answers, and she did not have to, because the connection is on tape from March. The incident is not the story here. The record is. On March 8th of this year, at Indian Wells, 3rd round, Eala broke Gauff in all 4 of the American service games in the opening set. Not 2, not 3, all 4. She rolled 5 consecutive games to take it 6-2. Gauff, one of the finest returners and one of the most stubborn competitors in the sport, put 7 double faults on the board and finished with 26 unforced errors against Eala's 12. Then Gauff started struggling physically, with visible discomfort in her left arm, and after Eala broke early in the second to lead 2-0, Gauff retired. That is the head-to-head. That is the actual document sitting underneath all the kind words. And I want to be scrupulously fair here, because it matters. Gauff retired hurt. Nobody serious calls that a clean win, and Eala did not treat it like one. She was emotional afterward and wished her friend a quick recovery. Gauff is not hiding from any of it either. Listen to how she handled it when the question came.
Then I played her in Indian Wells, and it felt like it was a little bit more American-leaning, that match, but I didn't get to finish it, unfortunately.
I didn't get to finish it. 4 words doing an enormous amount of work. That is not a player building an alibi. She had every excuse available. An injury retirement in her own country, and she used none of them. No blame, no asterisk. She said she did not finish, and she moved on. Compare that to what almost anyone else would have done with that microphone. Now here's the kicker, and it is the part that turns a scoreline into a pattern. Indian Wells was not the first time these two shared a court with the noise pointed the other way. Their first meeting was Dubai in February in the quarterfinals, and Gauff won that one comfortably, 6-0, 6-2. Comfortably in every sense except one.
I played her in, where was it, Dubai, and it felt like we were in the Philippines, and I thought it was so fun to play in that crowd.
It felt like we were in the Philippines. That is an American playing a tour event in the Middle East, describing the building as if she had walked into her opponent's home country. And this is the match she won 6-0, 6-2. Sit with that for a second. The crowd showed up in force for a player who lost that day 6-0, 6-2 on a neutral continent before she had won anything on tour at all. So when people tell you the Eala phenomenon is a Manila invention or a Filipino media creation, the rebuttal is a two-time Grand Slam champion describing it unprompted in a press conference in Canada. And Gauff went one step further in that answer, into territory players almost never enter about a rival, which is what somebody is actually like once the cameras are off.
But yeah, I think, what she's doing for the sport of tennis is great, and I think she's a great role model for people to look up to. And I said it the last time, what you get on court, or what you guys see on camera is who she is off court, and that's something I really respect when someone is who they are at all times.
And I said it last time. Again, the second occasion she has volunteered this unprompted. Gauff is not praising a stranger she has admired from a distance. She has partnered her in doubles, played her twice this season, lost to her once, and come away vouching for her character publicly on two separate occasions. And composure is the thread running through this entire file. Eala does not rattle when the match turns. Gauff does not reach for an excuse when she loses. Two players behaving under pressure in almost exactly the same way, which is why neither has said an unkind word about the other, and precisely why the rest of that draw should be listening harder than it is. But the room is not the story either, because if the room were the story, the results would only show up where the flags are. Put it all together and look at where the wins actually landed. At Wimbledon this summer, she became the first Filipino player ever seeded at a Grand Slam, and in the third round, she beat Iga Świątek 7-6 in a tiebreak that went to 9 and 6-2. She saved 2 set points in an opening set that lasted 84 minutes. Grass, London, no home crowd in any meaningful sense. She reached the 4th round, which remains her best result at a major. Then Washington, unseeded at the Mubadala DC Open, she won 5 matches to become the first Filipino ever to take a WTA Tour singles title. And she did it by beating the world number 3, Jessica Pegula, 4-6, 6-4, 6-0 in a final that rain kept interrupting. Look at that scoreline honestly. She lost the first set. She won the third to love, because here is what that means in practice. A player who was behind against the 3rd best player in the world in her first tour final, with rain stopping and restarting the thing across 2 days, did not tighten and did not shrink her game. She got better as the information came in. Same shape as the Świątek match, where 2 set points came and went, and the set kept going for 84 minutes. Different surface, different opponent, different continent, identical mechanism. And that brings us to the number I want you carrying for the rest of this: 9-4. Against players ranked inside the world's top 10, Alexandra Eala's career record is 9 wins and 4 losses. 7 of those wins came this season. 9-4. That is not a giant killer having a hot fortnight. That is a winning record against the best dozen players alive, built by somebody who spent most of that stretch ranked outside the top 30. She arrived in Cincinnati at a career-high world number 20 on a 7-1 record across the North American hardcourt swing, having won 10 of her last 12 matches. And here is where I have to give the other side of this its strongest possible run, because if I skip it, everything I have said is worth nothing. There is a serious case that this is all being oversold. Eala's summer ended in Toronto in the round of 16 against Belinda Bencic, 6-4, 6-0. That second set is 6 games to 0. That is not a bad day at the office. That is a professional being dismantled, and it happened this month, not years ago. Her best result at a major in her whole career is a 4th round. She has never played 7 matches at a Grand Slam because she has never had to. The second week of a major is a different sport from the first week, and no amount of beating top 10 players across 3 days in Washington tells you what somebody does on day 11 with a semifinal in front of them. That is the case. It is a real case. It is the one most of the tour has quietly settled on. And if you were writing a scouting report, you would put that 6-0 set at the top of the first page. So let's look at what produced it. Before Toronto, she had just won her first title in Washington in a final that ran across 2 days because of rain. She got on a plane. She beat Alicia Parks 6-1, 4-6, 6-2. 3 sets. Then Katie McNally, 6-3, 5-7, 6-4. 3 sets again. Then, with essentially no gap, she walked out against Bencic and lost the set to Love. The compression is documented. The 3 setters are documented. The rain-delayed final is documented. And I am not telling you Bencic did not earn that result, because she absolutely did, and nothing here takes a point away from her. I am telling you what the calendar looked like underneath it. That is the concession. Here is the demolition. Everything I just described, the compression, the back-to-back 3 setters, the no recovery turnaround, is a feature of a 500 and a 1000 stacked into the same fortnight. It is not a feature of a Grand Slam. So what happens when you take the one documented weakness of this player's summer and drop her into the one format that structurally removes it? You get exactly the problem the US Open draw is about to inherit. At a major, there is a day off between every single round. 7 matches across 2 weeks instead of 4 crammed into 6 days. A rest day is not a small comfort. A rest day is recovery. It is video. It is a scouting meeting. It is walking on court Thursday, having spent Wednesday studying the person across the net. Picture the practical difference. In Toronto, she came off a 3-set night match against McNally and had to be ready again almost immediately, which means whatever she learned in those 3 sets had nowhere to go. At a major, she finishes Tuesday and does not play again until Thursday. Every player in that draw gets the same rest day. The difference is what each of them can do with it. A player surviving on physical margin uses it to recover. A player whose weapon is information uses it to compound. And there is a documented example of exactly that buried in this same press conference. Because Gauff said something about Indian Wells that almost nobody picked up. She has not watched the match back. Not once in the 5 months since. Which means the most experienced, best resource player in this story, heading toward a possible rematch, was working from memory rather than from tape. And the memory she has is of the second game, when she first felt something wrong in her arm. That is what a compressed calendar does, even at the very top of the sport. It leaves matches unexamined. So think about what happens when the schedule finally stops moving and every player in that draw gets a full day between rounds to sit down and actually look at the footage. Everybody benefits from that. The question is, who benefits most? And the answer is, obviously, the player whose entire game is built on reading and adjusting rather than on out-hitting. Which brings us to the sentence I promised you at the top. Late in that press conference, a reporter went back to it and asked Gauff directly, what changed between Dubai, where she won 6-0, 6-2, and Indian Wells, where she was broken in all 4 of her opening service games? This is the world number 4 being asked to explain a player she has faced twice this year.
Honestly, I don't know. I can't really tell you.
Honestly, I don't know. I can't really tell you. That is not a player deflecting a hostile question. Nobody was attacking her, and she had every opportunity to give the safe non-answer and move on. She said she could not give a full analysis of what went wrong. She said she had not watched the match back. She offered what she herself called the generic answer, that Eala was probably more confident and had more wins behind her, and then immediately undercut it by admitting she did not think she was fully there mentally or physically that day. And then, crucially, she added that none of that takes anything away from how Eala was playing, and that Eala has grown enormously as a player. Think about what is actually being described. A 2-time major champion who has played this opponent twice in 5 months cannot tell you what she is dealing with. That is the whole thesis of this video, in 9 words from the one person best placed to know. Now hand that player a rest day before every round. So let me put the file on the table. Gauff, world number 4, in a press conference called Eala a great role model and said the audience she brings benefits everybody on tour. In that same room, she said no first-round opponent lets you exhale anymore. She admitted she has no explanation for the match she lost. Rick Macy, a coach who has developed 5 future world number 1s, called this week's Cincinnati matchup a great learning test and wrote that it would show everyone Eala's movement and defense in real time. Amanda Anisimova, before their first career meeting, said she was looking forward to it, called Eala a great player with a lot of fans and predicted a packed stadium. Nobody in that group is talking about a wild card. They are talking about a 9-4 record against the top 10. And the honest part, which I am not going to paper over, is that one genuine unknown is still sitting there untouched. She has never played 7 matches at a major, not once. Every structural argument runs in her favor, and none of it is proof, because you cannot simulate the second week of a Grand Slam, and nobody has ever seen her in it. That is the open question, and anyone who tells you they know the answer is selling you something. What I can tell you is what the draw is walking into. A player at a career-high ranking, seeded at a major, off her first tour title with 7 top 10 wins this season, arriving in New York with rest days between rounds for the first time all summer. In a country where she has already turned neutral crowds into home crowds, having beaten the world number 3 in a final and a former world number 1 at Wimbledon inside 8 weeks. And the last person to beat her did it to somebody who had been on court for most of the previous fortnight. So I will ask you again, and now you have the file in front of you. If that name lands in your section of the draw, are you telling your coach you got lucky, or are you telling your coach you have a problem? Because Gauff already answered that in the same breath she used to say she had no explanation.
Right now I'm healthy. Don't want to jinx anything, so I'm looking forward to playing another time when we're both healthy.
She wants the rematch. She wants it clean, with nothing to explain away afterwards, and she said so out loud in front of a room of reporters while the player in question was somewhere in the same building preparing to walk on court. The main draw at Flushing Meadows opens on August 30th and runs to September 13th. 2 weeks from now, somebody seated above her is going to open a bracket, find that name 3 rounds away, and have to decide which of those 2 answers they actually believe. Coco Gauff has already told you she does not have one.